Hey, what's up, everybody? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to Get Hit with the Truth. Today, we're discussing the mid-year champions report. So, I'm doing a big champions report on each governing body. This one's going to be on the IBF, the International Boxing Federation, their title, and what's going on, what's happened so far this year with the 12 titles from 122 all the way to heavyweight, and then what potentially is going on heading into you know, the new heading into the second half of the year. So let's get rolling right into it and start with the 122-pound super bantamweight title, which is currently held by the undefeated and unified champion Mirajan Akhmadaliyev, or better known as MJ. He holds both the IBF and WBA belts. He entered the year as the reigning IBF champion, a title that he won back in January of 2020 when he lifted both the WBA and IBF belts off of Daniel Roman by a split decision to become champion. Since then, he's made a couple defenses in he's made a couple defenses since. In June, right at the end of June, he would make a mandatory defense against the always tough veteran Ronnie Rios. And he did not disappoint. He absolutely dominated Rios over 12 rounds, hurting him, putting him down, and just breaking him down throughout the fight. He even broke his hand and still went and finished Ronnie Rios in the 12th round of a fight that he was way up on. He just wanted to make a statement. So, big win for him as he retained his two belts. Now the big talk is him versus Stephen Fulton Jr. for the undisputed title. Stephen Fulton holds the WBC and WBO belts. This fight makes sense. Eddie Hearn, MJ's promoter, came out and said there's nothing standing in the way of the fight, so that means no mandatories. But last time I checked, Mirajan had two mandatories due. Azat Havanassian is #1 contender in the WBA, and Marlon Tapales is supposed to be the mandatory in the IBF. Now, if the two governing bodies of WBA and IBF decide to allow an undisputed title fight, the only thing standing away then is the promoters and the networks. MJ is with the Zone and Eddie Hearn, and Stephen Fulton is with Showtime in the PBC. So I hope it can get made. Right now I'm about 50-50 after reading Eddie Hearn's comments the other day. I'm about 50-50 that it's going to happen. I hope it will. If it does, I think Stephen Fulton beats MJ, but I think it's a very good matchup. So I think it could go either way. But if the fight does not happen, I think MJ will probably defend both belts against Marlon Tapales or Azat Havanassian, more likely Marlon Tapales. So we'll see what happens. If he fights Tapales, I think he'll beat him convincingly and retain the belt. So we'll see what goes down. Hopefully we hear something soon. 126 featherweight. The champion there is Josh Warrington. He's now, he did not enter the year as champion though. Kiko Martinez entered the year as champion in March. He and Warrington had a rematch from their 2017 bout that ended by a controversial 12-round majority decision in favor of Warrington. This time, Warrington came in and dominated. He absolutely went in there and pretty much kicked the shit out of Kiko. Kiko had his moments, but he could not keep up, and Warrington finished him off in the 6th round and regained the IBF title. So now heading into the second half of the year, Warrington's been calling out Leo Santa Cruz, but Santa Cruz has a big fight with Lee Wood, a mandatory fight. There's also been talks about him and Lee Wood. I think Warrington's waiting around to see if the Wood and Santa Cruz fight does indeed happen. If it doesn't happen and Santa Cruz passes, then Warrington can fight either one. He can fight in a big fight with Santa Cruz, who's got the name, or he can fight in a bigger fight in the United Kingdom against Lee Wood, the unified titles, which would be big as well. So there's also the option that the IBF enforces the mandatory that is on Warrington, which is Luis Lopez. So we're just waiting around to see what happens, but I do expect Warrington back before the end of the year, and we'll see what goes down and who he goes against. 130 super featherweight. The champion there is undefeated Joe Cordina. He did not enter the year as champion. Kenichi Ogawa entered the year as the champion. In early June, he decided to make an optional defense against Joe Cordina, and ended up being a mistake as Cordina came out of nowhere and brutally knocked out Ogawa in just the second round with a monster right hand to score a big upset and capture the IBF belt. Now, heading into the second half of the year, Cordina, I think he's going to have a mandatory due either against Shavkat Rakhimov, who's undefeated, or Zelfa Barrett. Zelfa Barrett fought on the undercard, but I think he's going to have to make a mandatory against one of those two fighters. I'm leaning towards the Zelfa Barrett fight, but Rakhimov was the #1 contender coming into the year with Zelfa Barrett right after him, and that's how the IBF still has their rankings. Rakhimov 1 and Barrett 2. So Cordina, I think he might have to fight either one. If he fights Rakhimov, I think he loses. If he fights Zelfa Barrett, I think he could go either way. So we'll see what happens for Joe Cordina, but congratulations on winning the belt. 135 lightweight. The champion there is Devin Haney. Is the champion, the IBF and undisputed champion is Devin Haney of the United States. Haney did not enter the year as champion. George Kambosos entered the year with 3 of the 4 titles and was the unified champ. He went in against Devin Haney in early June on ESPN in Australia, and he got worked and completely outboxed and lost a one-sided unanimous decision as Haney became the undisputed lightweight champion of the world. Now, heading into the second half of the year, Haney has to defend against Kambosos in a mandatory rematch. That was part of a 3-fight deal that Haney signed, that if he scored the win, he would have to fight him in a rematch, and then it leads to a 3rd fight, likely against Vasily Lomachenko in the first half of next year. I think Haney beats Kambosos in the rematch and walks out of 2022 as the IBF and undisputed champion. 140 junior welterweight, the undefeated champion there is undefeated unified champ Josh Taylor. Taylor entered the year as champion. He originally won the IBF title way back in 2018 in the World Boxing Super Series quarterfinals when he defeated Ivan Barianchuk actually it was in the semifinals. He defeated him by a unanimous decision to capture that belt. Since then, he collected all 4 belts, entered the year as undisputed. He ran into Jack Catterall as WBO mandatory in March or in February, and probably should have lost that fight. He ended up walking away with a controversial split decision win in a fight where he got knocked down, and he was lucky to get the decision. But after so much ridicule and everything, he decided he wanted to stay at 140, and he was supposed to make a WBC mandatory against Jose Cepeda next, but that fight, I just read that he gave up that title in order to go to an immediate rematch with Jack Catterall. He said he's not waiting around for him, though. He needs to know soon if Catterall wants to fight him again next, and it would be for the IBF and WBO unified belts. And hopefully we hear something about that fight happening. If it does, I think Taylor's probably going to beat Catterall more convincing the second time around. I think he overlooked him the first time. I think he beats him the second time around and retains the 2 belts. But I think there is a chance that he gives up the belts before the end of the year to fight for to move up to welterweight, but we'll see. 147 welterweight. The champion there is the undefeated unified champ Errol Spence Jr., who holds the IBF, WBA, and the WBC titles. He entered the year as IBF champ, a title that he originally won back in 2017, I believe, when he stopped Kell Brook in 11 rounds in the United Kingdom to capture the belt. Since then, he's collected the WBC, and this year in April, he attempted to unify belts against Yordenis Ugas, and he dominated Yordenis Ugas, busting him up, got his face badly swollen, and stopped him in the 10th round to capture the unify 3 of the 4 belts. Now, heading into the second half of the year, it looks, for all intents and purposes, it looks like Errol Spence is going to go after undisputed. It looks like he's going to go after undisputed against undefeated WBO champion Terrence Bud Crawford in a mega fight. That's the fight everybody wants to see. I think it's going to happen. If it does happen, Terrence Crawford will be your new IBF and undisputed welterweight champion of the world, in my opinion. I think he beats Errol Spence, but Errol Spence has a serious shot. It's going to be a good one. Hopefully we hear the announcement of that soon. And I do think if he wins, there's a chance the belts go vacant. He vacates the IBF title before the end of the year, but we'll see what happens. 154 super welterweight. The champion there is the undisputed champion, Jermell Charlo. Charlo entered the year as the IBF champion, a belt that he captured in September of 2020 when he unified belts and stopped Jason Rosario. He added both the WBA and IBF titles in that process. Since then, in May, he attempted to unify all 4 belts in a rematch against undefeated WBO champion Brian Castano. They went at it in a great rematch of the first fight that happened in 2021 that most people felt that Castano won. This time he wasted he just scored the harder shots. He was getting outlanded, but he took the punches, scored the harder shots, and eventually stopped Brian Castano to become the undisputed super welterweight champ at 154. Big time win right there. Second half of the year, it looks like Tim Tszyu is going to be his opponent. Tim Tszyu is his WBO mandatory #1 contender. It looks like they're going to lock horns for the undisputed title. It doesn't look like anybody's stripping them right now, especially the IBF. So looks like that's what's going to be next for Charlo in the IBF title. I think he's going to stop Tim Tszyu or score a decision and retain the titles, but we'll see what happens. Should be a good matchup. 160 middleweight. The IBF champion there is Triple G Gennady Golovkin. He's also the unified champ. He holds both the IBF and the WBA titles. He entered the year as the IBF champion, a belt that he captured in, I believe it was October of 2020, when he scored a controversial decision win over Sergey Derevyanchenko. In April, he attempted to unify belts against Ryota Murata. It was a good competitive bout for the first 4 rounds, and then from rounds 5 on, he broke down and took over and stopped Ryota Murata to unify the 2 belts in the middleweight division. Now, next though, in the second half of the year, he will not be defending the IBF title as he's moving up to 168 pounds to challenge Canelo Alvarez in a much anticipated 3rd fight between the two. The IBF title, in my opinion, is going to stay with Triple G, but if they order Triple G to make a mandatory defense after Canelo against Esquiva Falcao, I think there's a good chance Triple G allows the belt to go vacant. Falcao does not have a big name, so it's not much of an enticing fight for Triple G. I don't think he'll go for it, but I think they're going to allow him to hold on to the belt for a while after a potential loss to Canelo Alvarez, which I think he will lose. Now, 168 super middleweight. The IBF and undisputed champion there is Canelo Alvarez. Alvarez entered the year as the champ. He captured the IBF title back in November of last year, 2021, when he stopped Caleb Plant in the 11th round to become the undisputed super middleweight champ. And he has not yet fought this year. He does have he moved up to light heavyweight in May and tried to challenge for a title there, came up short, and now he's moving back down to 170 or 168, where he will make a title defense against Triple G and a much anticipated 3rd fight on DAZN pay-per-view on September 17th. I believe Canelo's going to stop Triple G or defeat him decisively, retaining his undisputed title. After that, I doubt the IBF enforces him to make a mandatory defense. So likely Canelo's going to walk out of the year as champ. There's talks about him fighting John Ryder as well in December, which I think he would win that one as well. So I think Canelo's walking out still champion by the end of the year. 175 light heavyweight, the IBF and unified champion there is the undefeated Artur Beterbiev. He entered the year as the IBF champion. That's a title he captured, I believe it was in 2017. When he knocked out Enrico Quailing for the vacant belt. He entered the year, and in June he attempted to unify belts against WBO champion American Joe Smith Jr., and he absolutely rolled over Joe Smith, stopping him in only 2 rounds as he unified 3 of the 4 belts. Now, heading into the second half of the year, it looks like he has a WBO mandatory defense against former world title challenger Anthony Yarde of the United Kingdom. That's a big fight right there. I think Yarde is a serious contender, but he is the underdog. But I think Beterbiev is going to knock him out and retain all 3 of his belts and walk into 2023 as the champion. We'll see. Next at 200 cruiserweight, the champion there is Jai Opatai. He did not enter the year as champion. Maris Bradis did. Opatai, right at the beginning of July, just last weekend, upset Maris Bradis by a convincing unanimous decision and captured the IBF title. He broke his jaw in the process. I don't think he has a mandatory due in the second half of the year. He talked about possibly unifying belts with Lawrence Okoli, but not sure if that's going to shake out or not. But congratulations to him on becoming the new champ. I hope he does return before the end of the year. And finally, the heavyweight title for the IBF is currently held by the undefeated unified champion, Oleksandr Usyk, who holds the IBF, WBO, and WBA titles. He entered the year as champ. He captured all 3 of those titles last year when he defeated Anthony Joshua by unanimous decision. Now, in August, he is going to be rematching Joshua on DAZN, big-time heavyweight bout. I personally feel that Joshua is going to defeat Usyk in the rematch and stop him and regain the unified title for the 3rd time. Whoever walks out of that with the 3 belts is likely going to have to defend, or might have to fight, or might end up fighting before the end of the year. Even though I think it's a stretch, they might end up fighting Tyson Fury for the undisputed title, but I don't think that's going to pop up for the end of the year. So, big time fight, Usyk Joshua 2 on DAZN on August 20th. So that's what I got. That's the mid-year champions report for the IBF, the International Boxing Federation. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, smash the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate any and all support. This is True Boxing. You've been hit with the truth.